say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We've been running with the lions, lions. We've been running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We've been running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. So I don't know, for whatever reason, my guest got kicked off and she was waiting, but we're going to deal with that. I love when exciting things happen on the show. But anyway, I hope you guys are having a fabulous, fabulous Sunday, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. I'm your host, Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and I do this show every week. The show is really important to me because it's about people who show up authentically, shed their gloves, shed their ego, and do something courageous, do something that is authentic to them. A lot of my guests have changed careers. A lot of them have changed their lives. And then some of them have just gone after a calling that is a little unusual. And I would say that this is true for my guest today, Tara Wells. She is a sports social worker, and that is a little unusual. I don't think I've ever had somebody like that on the show, and I don't even know anybody who does these things. So she has a really interesting story and was very inspired by her own mental health journey into helping athletes on and off the field. And she's really vested in helping them get their mindset right, because retirement for athletes can be really, really difficult. But we are going to get into that conversation shortly. But before we do that, as always, I want to thank my sponsor, Elevated CPAs, for sponsoring the show every week. Again, if you're looking for an accountant, you have a small business, maybe time to get an accountant to do all that icky numbers work that you don't want to do. All right, welcome back. So just a little housekeeping issue, just because I had a little snafu, it kind of kicked me off and then I had to come back in. Sometimes when that happens, the show will not be seen on YouTube live. It may be under the video section. So if you're trying to access it, I just wanted to let you know that that could be the case. So just some housekeeping issues and it happens sometimes. But I am so excited to talk to Tara. I actually met her in West Palm Beach, it's probably been about 2 years ago. We met when I was giving a talk to her, a group that she was attending, and she told me what she did. And I think I knew about the show at the time. So we had kept in contact, and I love how things just happen in the right timing, and it just happens when it's supposed to. Sports is a very interesting topic to me because I think that many of us don't perceive ourselves to be athletes or in many ways. And many of us have that athletic ability in us. I would say for me in particular, I never saw myself as athletic. I always saw myself more as an intellect. So I think there's a lot of mindset shifts that go on for people that are athletes, people that are not athletes, people who do sports and people who don't. So I'm excited to get into this conversation with Tara. So let's go ahead and bring her on. There we go. I was like, I lost you again for a second. How are you? Sorry about that. It was like the recording started and next thing I knew you were gone and I had to set up a whole stream.
Hakuna Matata, I found you put out that, not even an olive branch, you put out the biggest branch. I got right back on. We're here.
Thank God. I was doing everything really fast behind the scenes. I was like, we got to get this going.
You gave me plenty of time to get in here, so that was awesome. And I still got to see the intro and everything. So thank you for that.
I think these things happen just to test us sometimes, just when you get all too comfortable with everything. I'm like, oh, I got this. Everything's great. I was like, I just do my thing. And next thing you know, I'm like, where's my guest?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, but I'm so happy to have you on here. I'm glad you saw you were able to get back in. So thank goodness for that.
Absolutely.
So I was telling the audience, you probably weren't there when I was telling them about a little bit about your mental health journey, which is really what inspired you to do this line of work. So I was hoping maybe we could just start there because I feel that's the beginning of the journey for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dive right in. Absolutely. So it's being a sports social worker, it wasn't exactly the most linear and obvious path for me, especially that phrase sports social work is still relatively unknown and very much brand new. Even for me, I only just started calling myself that maybe a few months ago, but it's definitely like the emerging area of expertise that I'm finding myself in, and I love it here. And the reason I do is I feel very, very connected personally to my work. Once an athlete, always an athlete is something I very much believe in. And outside of athletes, I just really like working with competitive minded folks and egos and all of that good stuff because that's some good clay to model with. Like I definitely can work with that. So for me personally, I can take it all the way back to middle school and being at what I would consider mentally my lowest. I really wasn't doing very well mentally. Who's to say why? Because we certainly didn't understand a whole lot then, and we're barely making strides now. But me personally being in recovery, specifically from an eating disorder that started around that time, I've been in recovery for, I would say, actively 12 years now. So doing some really good work for myself and bringing that into my peer connected work that I do. Sometimes it's really valuable as a former athlete or current athlete, wherever that mindset is, to kind of bring that work into what works for me or what has worked for my progress and clearly line it up to what my client is requesting and being able to say, look, I can tell you what the research tells me and I can reread it to you. But this is also what can really work for us. And also with the area of athletics, especially with eating and body, can be very, very challenging. If someone is actively in their athletic journey, in their career, whether they're in high school, college, professional, beyond, it can be really hard to get advice, treatment, feedback while you're in a sport that may be encouraging triggers that may be really working against you. And most athletes, if they're listening to this, are not thinking, well, quitting is not an option. Like getting rid of that trigger isn't always an option. So having someone like me in their corner can really make a difference as to how do I realistically make this work? And I'm also able to discern if that realistically isn't where we're at. I can be honest. I can kind of add that ear. But to also answer your question, I currently am obviously in recovery. I'm going to be lifelong in recovery. Something I'm very proud of. And also managing symptoms as a person who lives with anxious thoughts, with newly diagnosed ADHD, as a professional woman. That has been a fascinating area of research as the person engaging in that too. So I'm very inspired to kind of bring in this learning symbolic for little me, for my inner child, right? Like, let me be that support. Let me be that person that I really could have used when I was playing tennis and lacrosse growing up.
That's amazing. So I have some questions about the triggers that you were talking about.
Sure.
So can you talk about some of the triggers that you've seen that athletes deal with?
Absolutely. So, if you're familiar, there are quite a few sports that require weigh-ins for
Mhm.
you to participate, and that can happen in high school. So, kids as young as 14, 13 are weighing in for weightlifting or weighing in for wrestling, or
Mm.
even younger are engaging in weigh-ins. And
Mhm.
that's something that can be a very triggering behavior if you already have disordered eating or straight up eating disorder behaviors and symptoms. So that can be triggering by itself.
Mhm.
And then some of the more insidious stuff can also be triggers in terms of how our teammates are talking about bodies and food. And a lot of us are just not educated or well educated on how do we discuss bodies and food and other things without adding value to those types of things, right? In terms of
Mm.
talk about how we look or good and bad foods, things like that. So I kind of venture into that area as well of knowing too much. I wasn't supposed to know that much as a 14-year-old girl, but I was also a child of like the new millennia, and thin was in. Like heroin chic was a thing, and it was really hard to get away from that. It was
I didn't even know that was a term.
don't recommend looking it up, but it was
Oh my
like
God.
it was incredibly, I'll use the word insidious again. It was everywhere. It was really hard. Any of my fellow millennials will likely remember that it's infamous in my mind. It's like planted. It was a cover story of Jessica Simpson, and like she had let herself go, and like that would be considered thin today. Like we just have a completely different mindset. And that's what happens is there's these trends and things like that. So to understand how to discuss athletic ability or how to discuss success, achievement without putting value on things like body and food. So those things become triggers and how we talk about those things. Learning empowering language. Language really very much matters in my work. So that's something that I've really tried to hone in on. And that's something that like my clients are constantly teaching me things in that area because it's a moving target.
Wow. I I'm just so glad we're having this conversation because I never thought about this, to be honest with you. So much of what I love doing the show is really about bringing this awareness to the audience, and then hopefully if they come across it somewhere, they would go back to the interview and, realize that they maybe can make a difference somewhere. This
Mhm.
is what I want to do is spread the word. Weight, our body image is so prevalent. I mean, when I grew in, if we look at things since, 1920s and 1900s to now, what is attractive in the human body and women's bodies in particular has shifted so drastically.
Oh yeah.
And it's just crazy to think about. So I think one thing that is triggering is that it changes. So, you could figure out what you think you want to be, and then it's different.
Oh yeah. I can only imagine. Something that's like the that helps me flip it to a little bit of the comedic or sarcastic side of things too is the first Olympics was done naked, and I'm sure no one was really worried about whose rolls or whose abs or whose pecs or traps, whatever was going. Those were athletes.
Right, right. That's so true. And again, going back to the shifting of things, I mean, when I grew up, it was just everything was so different. I mean, I was growing up in middle school. I was probably it was the 70s or early 80s or something. And what was attractive then is so different than what's attractive now. And then by the time I was in med school and college, I mean, everything had shifted once again. So if you're old enough, you've seen these so many different trends.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking my lips were too big when I was in my 20s. And now it's hysterical. If that version of me saw what was going on today,
My neck is going to fall off. Absolutely. You're on it. I think that's you're hitting also on one of the pain points of not necessarily my work, but just growing up is if
Mhm.
I knew then what I know now, like how do I instill in 16-year-old me that it does get better? Like factually it gets better because the pendulum will swing again, and you will find the place where you feel the most confident, and hopefully the world will report back to you in that way. But feeding that to ourselves is something that's such a skill that we deserve to work on early and earlier and earlier.
Well, here's my thought. Does the world really need to weigh in?
Of course not.
The world and society, in my opinion, are highly misguided.
Absolutely. Misaligned, misguided. How many industries? You are one of the experts on that. Those industries that really does, that can oversell us on what we're supposed to look like. And it's really back to our self-empowerment and, being that voice for ourselves. But 16-year-old me, I mean, certainly not younger than 16-year-old me, had no idea what those words or what that language even was supposed to sound like.
100%. And even, you know what, I tell you, I wasn't there in my 30s. I wasn't even there in my 40s. I got there to actually loving my body in my freaking 50s.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's crazy that I feel that way. And you would think that I'd look back at my 20-year-old self and feel like, oh my God, I feel better in my 50s because I'm comfortable with who I am. But it took a long time.
I know. I know that's right. And I like this trend we're in right now. Like women's rugby is getting this really big push, which you are not thin playing rugby. Granted, there are thin girls playing rugby. They are strong as hell. Do not get it twisted. But there is no supposed to's in a lot of these sports and how we're coming in. The Williams sisters, thick, strong, beautiful, gorgeous women, and a force to be reckoned with.
Right. Well, and depending on what sport you're doing, a certain body type aligns better with that. So in my adventures seeking, time of thinking that, yes, it could probably be more athletic. This happened over the last 10 years or so. I was running, I was doing half marathons and whatnot. I realized very quickly that the best runners are very tall and very, very lean. Well, I'm not built like that. And then I've just tried a bunch of different things. Now, I was a good swimmer, that was great, but the running wasn't so great. And neither was the cycling. So I realized that, although I can do these things, these are not the best fits for me. And then I landed on, I think what is the best fit for my body type is martial arts.
There you go.
Because I can be, muscular in that and do better. And that's what I really like the most. So, I think for the people out there who are not really sure of what their athletic inclination is, my thought is just really that we should all try a bunch of different things, and different body types really do lend themselves to different sports and different types of athletic predispositions.
I know that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, if I could empower somebody to whatever your insecurity is physically, tune into that. What does that piece of you, part of you, do for you so well? If I'm like, oh, my hips are so wide, I got great lateral movement on the tennis court. Can't tell me anything about getting from one side of the court to the other. I will be there. And
oh my God, that is
get me there.
That is beautiful. I love that. And that's sort of, I think, what I was getting at, but you said it so eloquently. It is this appreciation of what that can do. So I can sprint very fast. I mean, for how tall I am, I'm a good sprinter, but I'm not a good long distance runner. And I always, had issues with hips. And it's just because that was not what was in when I grew up. Yeah. So I love thinking about it that way. How does this empower you to do the thing that you love? And thank goodness I have X, Y, and Z, because it allows me to do the thing I love. I love that. I love that way that you've reframed that for your athletes. Yeah. I wish I had you in my corner when I was 16.
Speaking exactly to where I ended up here. Yeah. Like give me back me.
Well, I want to also ask you about the trauma-informed approach. So what is that exactly, and how does it apply to the athletes that you're helping?
Good question. So I came into this space as a social worker before I got back into the sports arena. So I was a student at University of Michigan. I was also an RA and a tutor specifically for the athletics department there. So that was my background before I got back into this work. And then I deviated away from athletics for a little bit. Mental health wasn't there yet. It was very much like career advising, maybe some life skills, maybe mental skills, and a whole lot of academic advising, but not so much mental health like we see now. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you had a sports psychologist and sports psychiatrist on contract, but they weren't full-time employees typically.
Mhm.
So before I got back into this specific arena and with my niche now, I was doing regular schmegular counseling, social work, based work in agencies here in Palm Beach County. And what I really started to gain in that work was an appreciation for trauma work. So when I say I'm trauma informed and how that even matters, how that's even relevant, is I'm able to receive people's stories and help translate what their skills are. All of us have coping skills. Whether you've been to therapy or not, we all have coping skills. My question for everybody is, how healthy are those for what your goals are? For you getting on the other end of your work, your self work, and what your goals are,
Mhm.
how healthy are those coping skills to get you there? So we can talk about things like alcoholism. We can talk about things like dating the same person type of person over and over again, right? There's something that we're healing, there's something that we're responding to, but do we know what that is? So my approach is very much, oh well, this is why you do that. This thing, your brain is thinking it's protecting itself, or your brain is familiar with this, so that makes it comfortable.
Mhm.
And baseline logic, that makes a lot of sense. Our brains don't always exist in the same conditions that we experience our world, which is
Mm.
conflicting. It's really conflicting. So my trauma informed approach is, okay, I know a lot more about how you grew up, or that experience you had at your first university before you transferred. That sounds like something that could be traumatic. Let me tell you why you're doing this now. And that extends to a lot of the work. I did a lot of childhood trauma work before I got back into the sports social work arena. And I think that's really helping me inform a lot of the work I do now. Not everyone I see shows up with that level of what we call big T trauma, but
Mhm.
it certainly gives me really empowering language, I think, for my work. And it makes me a really good listener when it comes to people's stories. Everyone's an expert on their own story, whether you've told it yet or not. And I pride myself on being a professional listener in that regard. So that trauma informed piece really makes me I like to say, an excellent listener.
I would say that I would guarantee that you're an excellent listener, just judging by your disposition and how you speak. I'm actually wondering if you could share a story, obviously anonymously, of maybe one of your favorite, athletes that you've able to help and get to the other side.
Sure, sure. I'm sure a lot of therapists or people in the helping field or even in medicine. Oh no, did I lose you?
Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. I was going to put you on a spotlight. So,
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that.
oh,
Let me
no,
not
that's okay.
interrupt you.
That's okay. Go ahead. I want you to
In
have
that
the
way.
spotlight while you're telling the story.
Perfect. I appreciate that. So a lot of my clients, like I was saying, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. You find like these patterns with them. So I would say over the past couple of years, I've been dealing with a lot of identity work, which I think is what's going to carry me for, if not the rest of my career, at least for a long time. And thinking of one case in particular, and many athletes can relate to this, unfortunately, early retirement, not by choice. So, thinking of a client who experienced a career ending injury. Before that injury, there was a season ending injury that they kind of still worked through because they were at a point of their career where, like, I could end now, but there's a lot at stake if I end now. We're talking about scholarships, we're talking about potential endorsements, like the future direction of their work as an athlete. So they pushed through, which did damage, as pushing that hard through an injury will do. It's very, very difficult. It's also very difficult to tell an athlete not to do that. So thinking about when they finally got to me, it is second surgery, looking at a third even, making strides in PT, but their mentality wants them to be as healthy as they were before their first injury, which is, again, a very difficult place to be. It's not always realistic. My job is to support, validate, but also let's get you to an actionable place where what choices do we have today? We don't have the same choices we had 5 years ago. And that goes for most of us. But if we see that as a deficit, we're going to find ourselves into in some really negative spirals and cycles, some really unproductive, maybe rather than negative cycles. So it's with this client in particular, the strides that we were able to make had nothing to do with their PT. It had everything to do with a mindset, not shift, but an openness. I'm open to the possibility that I can be healthy and I can practice my sport and I can play my sport if I can negotiate with myself, if I don't allow my identity to be in the athlete I was 5 years ago, which was excelling, which was making major gains, doing great things with their team. I don't want to say too much because I obviously don't want to compromise their confidentiality and their identity.
Well, I think there's so much attached into their ego with this, because their sense of self-worth, from, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, is absolutely wrapped up in that identity of being this type of athlete. So I can't imagine. I mean, we all go through this when we have these identity shifts. I mean, I went through it when I left surgery. So much of my identity was wrapped up in being a surgeon that I didn't even know who I was. So just understanding that shift for me, what that was like, and it was years of my life, obviously. So it's, those are kind of similar. So I could see that could be devastating. And then now you're dealing with not adults, but probably younger. But what's the age range that you usually deal with? Does it matter, or?
Because I do mostly virtual and talk-based therapy, the youngest that I'll see is around 12, 13. I have an 11-year-old right now, but they're pretty exceptional. But I'll start at 12 and then through the lifespan. My sweet spot is like young adults and teens, young adults and emerging adults.
That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that it is so devastating. I think sometimes people don't understand how devastating it is, especially if your identity isn't wrapped up in it. So for anybody, if you remove the identity that you mostly associate with, it will create an identity crisis.
You're spot on. Everything you said.
Whatever it is, whether it's your identity as a mother, when the children leave the house, you've got an identity crisis. If your identity is as a teacher, when you don't teach anymore, you have it spans everywhere.
It does.
And I just say this so that the audience can understand how massive this really is, because I think, and I know I used to think this, these athletes, like whatever, they, once they're not doing that or whatever, they still have a very good life. But I didn't understand it till I went through my own identity crisis. Now I have a way better understanding of it.
Yeah, he's not my client, but Tom Brady has a very interesting story for any of my football fans. Obviously he's a Michigan man, so I feel pretty connected to his work. But he's worked with mental coaches. He's worked in that space. I really am dying to dive into his brain a little bit, because came out of retirement. I'm obviously not in his household, but I can only imagine what those conversations with his now ex-wife were like, when I'm imagining being a Brazilian woman being like, okay, Tom, you said you're retiring. Come raise these kids with me. Let's have our white picket fence. And he's like, you got it. I really miss the game. I think I'm going back. I want all my research-based questions in my head. I'm like, Tom, just I'm so curious. No judgment, just so curious.
Yeah, I mean, that is really a thing. And I don't know the whole story because I don't follow it that much. But if I remember correctly, I thought their marriage broke up mostly because of that. Was that not?
That was my understanding. But again, I have a hard time maybe it's just because I'm so jaded by people's stories, but I can't read an article or anything other than what they say or their representatives speaking on their behalf. I'm like, exactly. I have assumptions, I have ideas, but that man was dedicated to his sport and it took care of him. But I know being a family person and playing at that level is very difficult to do.
Yeah, 100%. And then I think this brings up another good point, is that these identity crises, they don't just affect the person, they affect your family members, the people that are close to you. So if it's a child, it's affecting their parents, brothers, siblings, etc. If it's Tom Brady, it's affecting his wife, it's affecting his children. There's so much that we don't really realize. So it just brings so much awareness to this.
Definitely.
So with this particular client, you use the trauma-informed approach to help them through this, and what was the outcome?
The outcome is ongoing because our stories are always ongoing.
Of
The
course.
outcome is still intensive. I would make the argument that they're not quite on the other side of this, only because it's still relatively fresh for our work. Um, and there's still like another surgery is still on the table, so that's really challenging them
Hmm.
mentally, physically. It's very taxing.
Hmm.
Their openness to who they get to be is so much broader than when it was when I first started working with them. So my current favorite phrase right now is I'm open to the possibility dot dot dot.
I
I
love
am
that.
open that this gets to be true about me. I am open that there is life, there is identity. There are people who are still learning about me. There are people in this world who haven't met me yet that I'm going to be so close to. All of these things that promote hope, optimism, internal locus of control, the belief that I control certain outcomes and I get to make choices for myself. Those are so important, and oftentimes we can feel robbed of those if we feel like we're not in control, if we believe that and we fall into those traps. So for this particular client, it's that openness that I've seen
Hmm.
start to appear.
I love that because when we are open, we are in a different place than when we're closed off, just
Mhm.
emotionally, physically, vibrationally. There's just so many different things that change once we're open. And even just being open to change and
Mhm.
just understanding, yeah, even if, I mean, I don't think this is an easy thing to accept, but even if you don't play anymore, that you could still lead a very, very full life.
Yes.
And I think, but easier said than done. But but I think it takes some shifting in a perspective for these athletes. So, kind of an unusual question. I imagine that most of your athletes probably have ongoing things. So
Yeah.
it must be hard to take on new clients. So if you keep
Yeah, I
going,
try I try not to
how
hoard
hard?
my clients. Like we foster really genuine relationships and I'm a
Yeah.
relationship-based person.
Hmm.
Um I am a goal setter. It's one of the first things I do with any client I work with, whether they're an athlete or not an athlete, because I do have a small private practice as well.
Hmm.
So, our goal setting is really to help define what do you identify right now as what we're working on. And that's a living document. It's not sealed and we open it in 6 months and see how well you've done. We do check. But for the most part, there's a presenting situation that's showing up. And sometimes it's time constrictive, sometimes it's over the course of this season, I want to accomplish this. Cool. And then we shake hands and see how we're doing at the end of the next of that season. For a lot of people, I've been working with a lot of people for quite a bit of time
Hmm.
because like you said, they keep showing up. So taking on new clients is something that I'm open to doing. I'm also scaling next year. So that's really exciting for what I have in store, to be able to take on more folks with with my mentality, with my mission statement for Finish Line Mindset, but also just keep spreading on the work. But I don't like firing people. I don't like firing clients. I avoid it when I can. If
Hmm.
you think that the work that we're doing is still fruitful and we can move to every other week, we can move to once a month, we can move to maintenance even. Um, that's a beautiful thing because then I know that the skills that we've been working on take care of you in between our sessions.
Right, right. And that it almost as if it almost seems as if you are giving them tools. And once they gain some sort of decent mastery of the tools that you've outlined for them or that you guys have created together, I don't know how that works, but whatever that is, then once they're able to utilize those tools effectively, they can just space the sessions out. So I guess that gives you a little more space to, as your clients become more adept at using their toolbox, they can go further and further, and then you're able to take new clients. Okay, I was thinking because I said, wow, how is she able to take new clients? And yeah, that could be, I could see that there could be a bottleneck, which is
There,
you.
oh gosh, yeah. I have clients that I suspect will be lifers with me, and I love the thought of that actually. If I think about the
Mhm.
clients that I'm thinking, I'm like, yes, absolutely. We will be in this forever. And I don't mind that at all. I obviously don't have unlimited time to to
Of
take
course
on
not.
so many, but it's I don't intend to, but I mean that's part of the formula too. It would be pretty impractical and unwise maybe unethical to keep clients with me just because new problems emerge. That's 'tis life. Um,
Exactly.
so
So
yeah, I try to rotate.
how will you scale? Or are
How
you at
will I
liberty to say
scale?
that or?
Ooh, so this is preliminary conversations. Um, I have coaches across the US that I have spoken to that I have started proposing options if they wanted to be hired. So I have one girl who's still in grad school right now, which is perfect because then I'm like, skip the agency work, come on over, let's do this
Mhm.
together. Um,
And
so
they
yeah,
don't have any
hiring a
bad
few.
habits or anything that you have to untrain them out of. You could just train them in your way.
Exactly, exactly. And just like fostering all of that, I'm going to become a qualified supervisor for
Oh,
social
great.
worker interns in the state of Florida. I'm looking to get my license in a couple more states. Still trying to figure that out because there's some new mental health packs that are coming across the US. So more therapists, social workers, et cetera, can cross state lines.
Oh, good.
Which
Okay.
is great news for services and the flexibility that a lot of us have to take our work elsewhere
Yeah.
and things like that. So I'm excited about that. And then also I have workbooks that I'm rolling out now so I can access and support more people for a lower price point than meeting with me one-to-one, and workshops. I do a lot of workshops as well. So
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I love this for you. This is exciting because I feel that this is very, very important. And the reason I asked the whole question about this, whether you can take on new clients is because I would actually like to see more of this work being done because I feel it's very, very important. So,
well,
so I'm
good. I,
glad.
I would love to add some optimism to that. I took a certificate course over the summer, again with University of Michigan, and it was a 6-week program, and there were over 100 attendees. So that's very promising for sports social work to
Oh,
start
beautiful.
making more what I thought were ripples. It's looking like waves. So
Great.
we're doing the work. We're getting there.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. I remember when I first spoke to you in West Palm Beach, I was like, I've never even heard of this. This is interesting. So I'm glad that we're, finally able to really get this message out there.
Yeah.
So I want to also go into the, when you want to create more of an equitable landscape
Mhm.
in the sports field. And I know that we had talked in your biography, it talks about that you're really interested in the QTB. I just missed a letter. I just realized that I'm so used to LGBTQ that the other letters don't roll off the tongue. So actually, let's just start by explaining what that is, because
Sure.
clearly I don't have the letters right.
No, it's also relatively new. Again, something I just discovered, the QT BIPOC
Right. Yeah,
lens.
probably should have just done it that way because I missed a letter or two.
No, let me help. Yeah, QT BIPOC, which essentially is queer, trans, let me see, Black, Indigenous, people
People of
of
color.
color. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I know what it
lots
means. I just lost the letters along the way.
exactly, exactly. Same. I'll get tripped up in my head if it gets messed up. Trust that I know what I'm talking about. There's just so many keywords. Um, I've been working with LGBTQ plus populations for over a decade now. Same with people of color. When I talk about identity work, we've got lots of research on social identities and race and gender and sexuality, gender expression, romance, things like that. It's made a lot of headlines, it's made a lot of waves, we've made a lot of progress too. So I aim to bridge a gap again with the athletics sphere. So the way that organizations handle things like that, if we're even talking about DEI, which, oh no, I live in Florida, like that's touchy on its own.
Mhm.
I am a social worker. Policy is my jam. My field exists here because of I was going to say extremist, but obviously to me it's not that extreme, but
And
because
I'm
of
sorry
disrupting.
for the audience, can you tell them what DEI is?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, in oversimplified terms, it's essentially equity. You used the word equity before, which I love. When we're talking about equity, we're talking about access to opportunity
Hmm.
for minorities.
Hmm.
So we're talking about access to, we're talking about the the wage gap or the earnings gap. We're talking about racial discrimination in education. We're talking about all these layers of systemic work that we want to, I would say, undo. Can't undo what's already known, but essentially make leveling the playing field. Let's make things equitable. Let's get the right people in the right positions to be successful without ignoring barriers that have been there and that can't be undone. Mm-hmm. So for QT BIPOC athletes, lots and lots and lots of barriers. I think I don't like saying favorite because I don't like that this is a topic at all, but Serena Williams having her first baby and almost dying in labor and delivery is something that should never be happening to a woman. Forget about her access and her capital, right? This should not be happening to women in the modern medical world that we live in.
Well, so I'm not familiar with the story. So if you don't mind, because I'm sometimes I'm like an ostrich with my head in the sand. I don't hear about it.
Absolutely. And again, it's not like I was in her delivery room, but she, from what I understand, she was experiencing intense blood clots. I believe that's my oversimplified version of how I understand it. But they were severe they were threatening her life while she was delivering. Okay. So she was not getting the medical care that she was due. And we're talking about Serena freaking Williams.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I'm like, well, if she's not getting the care, what are the rest of us going to do?
And if I can be a little like, again, not extreme, but there's still medical books out there that tell us that Black women experience pain at different thresholds than white women. That's still published. And it's despicable. I hope we can all agree that that is absolutely horrific. We know too much. Like that's a ridiculous assertion to make.
And not only that, but I mean, if you go back to medications and all these things, they're tested primarily on men. So we don't even understand why women have different side effects and whatnot. Yeah. So it's just crazy, really. Excuse me.
Exactly. Speaking to like one of my niches is also ADHD, newly diagnosed ADHD in adult women. Mm-hmm. Specifically professional women, because we're like, how did we get this far? And I have no executive functioning skills, apparently. Anyway, so for
Serena, we were talking about, so she just didn't get access to care and she almost died.
Well, she had access, but that's where I don't know exactly what happened. But the fact that this was a possibility for her and the stories that came out from it are just, there was a serious lapse somewhere. And that's not unique to her. There are so many stories of maternal mortality and a whole lot of issues that do not need to be happening to women of color. Men of color also really getting the short end of the stick, especially the way we talk about them in athletics is very, like, we treat them as a commodity, as like a machine of output for our entertainment. Like that really hasn't left this. It gives me a lot of cringes because we're still doing it and they deserve better. We really deserve to treat our athletes better. And then when we have these identities layered on top of it, it's symbolism, great. Representation, we love it. There's a difference between representation and commodifying. So things like that. And then with queer and trans athletes, we're still in some emerging research on what this is. A lot of controversial discussion on hormones and competing in the gender you were assigned at birth versus the gender you identify with. There's a lot of discussion that is so early. And I really want to just kind of be first in line to kind of read these articles and read these studies and read the stories of these athletes who are engaging in this work and competing at these high levels. So I really want to be supportive as a member of the community myself. I identify as bisexual, and I really want to get in there and really support all of my folks in the Rainbow Coalition.
Well, that's great. It's really, and you're just bringing up so many topics that I don't think any of us think of. And I have never thought about any of this, to be honest with you. So I love that I have this awareness now that I didn't have before. One thing I wanted to add about what you were saying about Serena Williams, on the other end of the spectrum, like not even related to sports, but just from the medical standpoint, one thing I will chime in on that whole industry is we are, I think we're in a state of crisis with our medical industry. It used to be you went to a doctor and you really were able to deliver this caring, personalized care. It's one of the major reasons I left medicine, actually, frankly.
Mhm.
So that's why I feel compelled to say this. When I first started, in the 20 years that I was in practice, when I first started, and this is the part I loved about it, spending time with my patients, really getting to know them. As you say, you're a relationship person. I'm a relationship person. Wanted to foster these deep and meaningful connections. I loved it when I saw family members of people that I had seen, et cetera, and, oh, I saw your daughter the other, it was wonderful for me. 10 years, probably 15 years into it, really, there was a massive input from the insurance companies about, the payments kept getting reduced. So you no longer, even if you wanted to do that, you almost can't afford to.
Yeah.
Because you have to keep the lights on. So now you're stuck. And I remember this moment where I realized that I was in my own private practice. So of course I went into my own private practice feeling like I could build and create the type of experience that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to create was a situation where they could just come in and get their testing even in the same day. I know these people are taking time off of work. I wanted to create that kind of environment. Well, the insurance companies got involved and they said, no, you need prior authorization for this, and this. So now that person has to come back 5 times to get different things done.
Yep.
Well, then patients are aggravated. And you know what? They wind up taking it out on the staff. They wind up taking it out on you. It is just such a mess. And I'm sorry, I'm going to just blame the insurance companies.
You're in good company. Absolutely.
I mean, it's their fault. It shifted everything so massively. And I watch physicians because they're stressed, they're burnt out. They don't mean, I think a lot of them want to do the best job that they can, but under the circumstances, it's really hard to. So, I could sit here and preach self-care all day long, but you know what? I had no time for self-care. It just isn't something that's okay. So anyway, that's my soapbox about the medical industry. So I think it's terrible that, this thing, and I see what you're saying. If something like this could happen to Serena Williams, knowing that could be very easily publicized, what about the millions of people that nobody would ever hear about?
Yes.
That's disturbing.
Yeah.
Really, really disturbing to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as people who are involved in healthcare and medicine, however it shows up, we are so big on prevention. If I can encourage you to do what you need to do today to protect tomorrow, we're doing it. Insurance companies are very much responsive, reactive. They're not preventative, right?
Exactly.
You get your preventative medicine, but I still have to pay to go get my iron and vitamin D levels tested. Like, that's prevention.
Mm-hmm.
But
a lot of the insurance companies won't even pay for those things because they're preventative. So one nice thing about all this is that there's been a real evolution in the medical field for, holistic providers, integrative functional medicine. I do believe it'll be a divided space. Some people will want to go the traditional route, and other people who care more about their wellness and preserving their wellness will probably go a functional, holistic, integrative route. That's what I predict. We'll see if I'm right.
I work with a lot of holistic healers as well, and there's room for all of us. It's just a matter of, this isn't pie. All of us need some type of support. All of us need some type of help. There is so much room for this work that we do. And like per your question earlier, I was never planning on scaling, but the work is calling for it, and I'm here to answer. That's what I showed up for. So whatever, what do I bill for? Like 4 or 5 different codes. Like I'll make it worth your while. I'll make it happen. And then insurance likes to take responsibility for how that works too, which is
of course. I got on my soapbox. I couldn't help it. I had a little flashback. I had a trigger. Let's just be honest. I had a trigger.
Again, great company. I'm right here with you. And I bill hardly any codes whatsoever, and I'm feeling it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And imagine, I was billing lots of different codes because I was crazy, but I think this is so, I think it's timely because I think, am I wrong about this? I feel like that more women are going into, sports, maybe even at an earlier age? Is that the trend that you're seeing?
Yeah,
This
there
is
was
my perspective, but I don't have numbers behind it.
oh, I don't either, but I did just read, I think it was Washington Post had just reported that we're at a recent all-time low for boys entering athletics, and women or girls are increasing. So we're talking about middle school athletics.
Wow.
So this is
Okay.
the first time that's ever happened. Um, we have pickleball, which is the fastest growing sport, I believe, right now. Women in golf is one of the fastest growing demographics right now. So that's really huge. But we're getting younger and younger with kids getting into athletics. And if I can do another pitch for why my work is valuable, if I didn't bring it in home now. But the other reason I like working with teenagers is younger and younger kids in athletics, which means younger and younger for club, travel, high intensity, high competition sports, which increases anxiety across the board. So we're seeing also higher levels of anxiety at younger and younger ages. So I love coming in, doing some prevention work. Let me show you how mindfulness works. Let me show you how visualization works. Let me give you a couple of skills that I can teach you in less than 30 minutes, and I can prevent something from happening down the road.
That is really, I almost feel, this just came to me. I almost feel that when these young people, not just girls, but young people get involved in sports, I feel like it should be mandatory that they be set up with a sports social worker.
I would love that.
I mean, honestly, it would help their career. It would help their mindset. It would help their everything, academics, all of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Biased, and I agree.
No, I mean, it's not even what I do, but I could see how it could so positively impact these young people moving forward in their lives. And I just really see value because sports is such a big part of our lives, especially with these children growing up. I know so many parents toting their kids all over the place for sports. So when that is such a big part of their lives, I think there should be more support around that. So I think that is my closing thought for this interview.
No, I appreciate it. Call to action. Let's do it.
We'll see. We'll see if it changes. But it has been such a pleasure interviewing you. And thank you for rolling with the snafu that we had. I said, oh gosh, I hope she finds her way back.
And we did. We're good.
Otherwise, it was just going to be me talking about what I think you were going to say. That would just not be any fun at all.
No, we did great. Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you so much for your interest in the work.
Absolute pleasure. I wish you the utmost of success in scaling and bringing more people on to continue doing the work you do. And I really am excited that we got to bring more awareness around this because this is a very obscure topic.
Appreciate it. Thank you again.
No problem. Have a fabulous evening.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. I did very much. It was engaging for me in ways that I did not expect. So next week, I'm going to be interviewing Lisa Charles. She is a former prosecutor, and now she's a wellness expert. So talk about making a radical shift. I think, she and I really have a lot in common because we went from these high power careers into a completely different industry. So I'm excited to get into that conversation with her. But in the meanwhile, I hope you guys have a fabulous week ahead. And I look forward to seeing you all for another episode of Gloves Off next Sunday night.